It's my pleasure to welcome Rabbi Haim Beliak. And now, we don't waste time. We ask the same question from you. We want to know what do you think about the Islamophobia and the Jewish community's experience similar to what the Muslims have in this community.
Thank you. First of all, I want to, is this on? Yes. I want to apologize for being late. We're dealing with storm-related babysitting duty in New York City. My wife is supposed to fly out and it's not going to happen. In any case, I want to wish you Ramadan Kareem, and I apologize for my tardiness. The issue of Islamophobia is a complex issue for Jews. Most Jews have not thought about it very seriously, and most Jews make too readily a comparison between anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. There are some parallels between anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, and it would take me at least an hour and a half to explain some of these issues. The issue of Islamophobia in America is related to, but different than, Islamophobia in Europe. I presently work about half my time in Europe, in Poland. And so I have a view of Islamophobia that is a little different than the view I had before I began to spend lots of time in Europe. Part of the issue of Islamophobia is that we first, I think, have to recognize that, like anti-Semitism, it is something that is generated. There are people who are interested in making sure that there is Islamophobia, and they fund researchers, I put the word researchers in quotes, to develop themes and theories about Islamophobia. I am very good friends with a number of the people who write this trash, and I'm ashamed of the fact that they have lent their scholarly abilities to Islamophobia and the things that support it. The nature of Islamophobia in Europe is a little different in that there is a question in the minds of many formerly ethnically homogeneous communities in Europe about what it now means for there to be large Muslim groups coming to their country. In America, more or less, as groups have come to this country, there's been an assumption that somehow they will fit in. And that has been, I would say, one of the great geniuses of America. That doesn't mean that the fitting in process has been an easy one. It is, in fact, sometimes a very difficult one. And for some people who come to this country, the fitting in process is still going on. It's still in process. For anyone who questions that, I urge you to go see the movie The Help, because the group that came here the earliest is still struggling with this issue, namely African Americans. So some groups got voted in to become, I'm using this term in quotations now, white, very early on. Jews, even though most Jews in the world are not skin color white, Jews got voted into being white very early on in their experience in America. Most Jews came here about the 1880s, and by the 1920s and 30s, they were being voted in to become white. Other groups that have been voted into the category of white are Asian Americans, which make up 46, 48 different categories of the Asian experience. They, in the large majority, are being voted into this category called white very rapidly. So the question is, when do Muslims get voted into this category called white? Or do they stand outside of this, either because of their own consciousness or because of other factors that they either choose to embrace or the society forces them to embrace? Clearly, in the last 11 years, the situation has been that the Muslim communities, specifically people from the Middle East, not all Muslims are from the Middle East, I don't need to say that to you, have been held outside of the process of whitening. And that has been part of a political decision on the part of people who needed the Muslim threat or the Arab threat for their political purposes. I'm sad to report that among the chief perpetrators of this are, again, lots of my friends and lots of my co-religionists. And it would be, again, silly for me to say they should know better, but I will say they should know better. And it is a troubling phenomenon in the Jewish community. There is a new report that has just come out that I will refer to later on because I don't know what my time frame is. Am I? All right. I'm okay?
You have devil.
Let me just say one thing about Europe, because that's a little bit different, and maybe if there's an interest in talking about this. The organization that I work for called Jews on First, that is not a claim of being first in any way except that we're standing on the First Amendment. So there is a comedic routine in America, who's on first, and we would like in this website for Jews to be people concerned about the First Amendment and all that that means in terms of the separation of church and state. We wrote 2 reports on Islamophobia, and I think that they are still of significance. One report was in the wake of the infamous distribution of a film called Obsession. That film is still being distributed. Its makers have now gone on to make a second and a third film, and that group is largely funded by foundations, unfortunately, of fellow Jews. And it is a very disturbing thing. I think we do a fairly good job in our report on Jews on First, laying out who the people are who are talking about this stuff. There are, in addition, some what I call faux Muslims who converted to Christianity who participate in this Islamophobia. And here I think we need to point to probably the largest perpetrators of Islamophobia. It's kind of a competition, I'm sad to say, between the Christian right in this country and the Jewish right in terms of the generation of Islamophobia. And we sort of lay that out in our first report on the movie Obsession, and then we wrote a second report which was published, I guess, exactly a year ago today, when we were all concerned about the so-called Ground Zero Mosque, or the mosque that is in the neighborhood of Ground Zero, which who knows if it will ever be built. But the second report I want to point to, because here there was, I think, a dawning acknowledgement on the part of at least the teachers of the Jewish community, and here I'm very proud of this, and that is that we collected without any difficulty, by sending out 2 emails, close to 70 sermons that were delivered at the high holidays last year that spoke in favor of and in recognition of the First Amendment, which guarantees Americans religious freedom. And these were sermons that were given during our high holidays and spoke universally about the fact that once we were in the position that Muslims find themselves, where people want to check about whether it's okay to have a mosque in their neighborhood, and so on and so forth. And so that issue around the ground zero symbolic use, I would say, since we're coming up on the 10th anniversary, the use of ground zero as a kind of symbolic measure of Americanness is a very troubling phenomena. And I was very proud of the fact that when we wrote our paper, there were rabbis who were sending us their sermons saying, I spoke about this, I want my congregants to know that we need to stand with Muslims, with people who want to express their religious beliefs in this country, and we do so as proud Jews and proud Americans. So that does not mean that Islamophobia, because some rabbis gave a sermon, has really disappeared, I want to say, but I was glad and heartened by that expression. I'll say one more thing about Europe, and then maybe it's best to allow other questions. In Europe, in general, there is not a sense or a sensibility that invites newcomers to become a part of that society. There is not a process of bringing people into the society that has been really practiced. Think of Turks in particular who've been coming to places like Germany since the very early 50s. Think of communities of people coming to France who are considered outsiders of France now 50, 60, 100 years after they've arrived from the countries that they come from. So I think that Europe in particular is very vulnerable to this kind of Islamophobia because its basic assumption is we have been here, we are the majority, we belong to this country. Everybody else is either a Gastarbeiter or just simply a Gast, and they better behave in the appropriate way. This is a more complex problem that I have just said in Europe. But one of the things I'm proud of is that the synagogue that I serve in Poland, in Warsaw, is next to, it's actually 3 doors away from one of the 3 mosques in Warsaw. Very teeny Muslim community in Poland. But there are native Polish Muslims who date back probably from sometime around the 13th, 14th century. But most of the Muslims who are now in Turkey are people, this particular mosque are mostly Middle Easterners. There's a Turkish mosque, and of course, where there's one Turkish mosque, there's a second Turkish mosque. They have difficulty getting along with each other. They constitute the majority of the Muslim community in Poland. And here I think that Poland is exactly the example. Poland is today 99% ethnic Poles. So the few Jews that are around, the few Muslims that are around, the few Protestants that are around, actually find common cause with each other. We go to each other's conventions, we talk to each other all the time. I don't think we have much of an impact on the ethnic Poles, but we enjoy each other's company and we're actually very good cooks. I hate to mention food this late in the day.
Rabbi, to be fair to everybody, I want to ask you the first question that you missed. The first question was that you have been with us a few years. What is your experience and what do you think about the interfaith dialogue and the tolerance in the Jewish religion?
I'm not exactly sure which part of the question to answer.
Okay.
So interfaith dialogue is a good thing. It's a new thing in the history of humanity. We should not be discouraged. Most of us, if we were back in our native countries, wouldn't be talking to people from other faiths. I don't think that there's too much interfaith dialogue, let's say, in the country of Iran. There may be friendships, there may be long-time sensibilities of accommodating each other.
In fact, there is dialogue.
But in Iran, in most of the places around the world where Jews and Muslims live, Christians and Jews live, there is not much dialogue. Dialogue, and interfaith dialogue especially, is something that I think has almost a patent in America. I'm glad to hear that there is something in Iran. Most of the time, it was not something, let's say, that our grandparents knew. I'm a person who actually studied the relationship between North African Jewish communities and North African Muslim communities. I still go quite regularly to Jerba and so forth. Dialogue is just not part of what has been historically the situation. The fact that we do that process is very precious here in America. And the fact that it's sometimes difficult and it's sometimes not as productive, and as my Turkish friends say, let's drink more tea, because they have a sense that you have to develop hospitality before you can have serious dialogue. I'm ready to be patient with that, because I think, given the alternative, dialogue is very important. We should not dismiss dialogue, but we should also not pretend that dialogue has, let's say, deep historical roots. There have been times in history when there have been important interchange between Jews and Muslims, and Jews and Christians, and Muslims and Christians, and so forth. But they are, frankly, quite rare and quite precious, and therefore I would argue that one of the subjects of dialogue ought to be to study those times in Spain, in Syria, in Turkey, etc., where we've had interfaith dialogue. But let's be as clear as we can. We're pioneers, and we should be patient with each other about the complexity of that process. Now, does Judaism tolerate interfaith dialogue? I think the answer 62 years ago would have been, not only do we tolerate it, we want to be the leaders in it. But we have tasted the poison known as nationalism as a community. And once groups taste the poison known as nationalism, it is pretty clear that people forget what that word dialogue means and what that word interfaith dialogue is about. Nationalism, from my perspective, is a mixed blessing for the Jewish people. I won't pretend to speak for other peoples, but I do have a sense that we lost something in the last 60 years. There is, in the Jewish community, at times a triumphalism that I'm uncomfortable with. I won't speak for other communities and tell them about their triumphalism, but clearly, once you have a nationalistic triumphalism, you lose some of the ethical moorings. And as a rabbi, I have to say that I'm concerned about that. I'm unfortunately, without pointing fingers, Jews are not the only ones who have lost their moorings. I would ask everybody of faith to think about it very seriously.
Thank you.